This was a helmet liner. And in here, you kept your toilet paper, which is about the only dry thing we had during the war. And this was the steel helmet that went on top to use to bathe in and things like that. I was took my basic training in the 65th Division, which had this patch. I brought this photo to show you that I wasn't born old. That was taken after basic training, and shortly after that I was transferred to the 26th Infantry Division, which has this patch, Yankee Division. They were a Massachusetts National Guard outfit. I only had 59 points to come home. You needed 60 to come home with a YD, so they put me in a tank outfit. And they let me drive them to the wash rack and back. I still don't have enough points to go home with them, and they put me in the rail splitter division, and that's what I came home with. I think that was the 84th Division. Most everything here has some story, and I'll tell you some of them. There is some good news tonight, though. I've never written a book. I don't have any book to sell tonight. And we are having this meeting in memory of Pearl Harbor. And a lot of people are trying to rewrite history, which really upsets me. I was a closet veteran for almost 50 years. I came home from World War II, was discharged on a Wednesday, and went to work at Camel Soup Company on a Monday. And I never talked about the war to anybody. And I have some bad feelings about that. My father-in-law was in the 108th Field Artillery in World War I. He fought in some of the same areas I fought in World War II. And I wouldn't talk to him either. I wouldn't join the VFW. I just did not want to know anything about the war. And then when they started rewriting history, and particularly the Enola Gay, and they were ready to put that display on in Washington, that really upset me. And I started writing letters. And one of the reasons now I do like to talk to people, this is about the third time, and I know I'm looking at a bunch of good citizens, but I'd like you to be active citizens. When you see something you don't like, write about it. And the display in the Smithsonian was really changed because of the actions of the people, probably mostly veterans, who wrote about it. If you go down there now, it's not a great display. I have a picture about what they show here. They show you the front fuselage back to the bomb bay. One room has a rudder, another room has one of the engines. The thing is all busted up. And then they have a video, which is very good. They just interview the crew members, and they each give you a little part of their story. But they were setting it up so it looked like the Americans were the aggressors. In no way could the Americans be the aggressors in the Pacific War. I mean, any country that instituted Pearl Harbor, the Tonga Death March, all the casualties of Iwo Jima and all those islands, how could you call the Americans the aggressors? And there are people trying to change VJ Day, which stands for Victory Over Japan, to something else. Well, it stood for VJ, Victory Over Japan then, and it still stands for Victory Over Japan. And I hate to see those kind of things change. 60 Minutes had a program where there were no Holocaust, there were no concentration camps. And that set me off. My regiment, or my division, liberated 2 concentration camps. I was in one of them. And I have pictures here taken after the war. I was on a bike trip. Alice and Bill Crockford were with me. And that was in our tour. And I took some pictures of the shower room, which really was a gas room, and the oven. Evans, those pictures are there. And you know, I just can't stand to hear that kind of stuff. Of course, I wrote the 60 Minutes and they ignored me. In Hawaii at one time, of all places, not long ago, there was a resolution put before the House to have America apologize to Japan. And I mean, that is really so unbelievable to me. And it was defeated, but the fact that it came up in Hawaii really disturbed me. So those kind of things brought me out of the closet and got me willing to speak to anybody that wanted to listen to me. I could shorten this very quick and tell you about, I don't know if you're interested in cowboy music, but remember Willie Nelson had a song, "Mothers, don't let your children grow up, or your babies grow up to be cowboys." And I would say, mothers, don't let your babies grow up to be infantrymen. It's a terrible, terrible life. Another thing that bothers me, and I'm not picking on Clinton because it didn't really start with his administration, but I think no one man should have the power to send American troops overseas into any kind of situation where there's danger. And now we've had a couple presidents do that, 1,000-year religious war, and we send 20,000 Americans over as though it was an emergency. I think they should have to have the backing of Congress before they send the troops. Another mindset that seems to be universal in the world is that it's okay to kill soldiers. Well, I can tell you, I grew up in a fine Christian family. I'm sure a lot of you knew my mother and father, and you knew my brother and sister. And never did they think it was okay for them to kill me. And I didn't think that way either. In Bosnia to date, there's been 134 casualties. 48 killed, 86 wounded. You don't read all that. I read that in the VFW magazine this morning. They aren't all American casualties, but casualties are casualties is what's on. There's been a lot written about macho soldiers, just like Schwarzenegger with these machine gun guns. That's not how the war is fought. That's only in the movies. I got into the war rather late. My brother says the only lottery he ever won was the draft. He was in the first group drafted out of Merchant Open, Sultan area in Camden County. He had a year to go and had brought some stuff home. He was sure he was going to get out, and they bombed Pearl Harbor. He spent 5 years in the service. But he wrote me one thing, never volunteer. And I remembered that, and it served me well. I can remember on the beaches of Wildwood, we used to summer there, and the submarines were sinking the tankers, and the beaches would be covered with oil. Of course, we didn't know all about the environmental hazards. All we did was keep a bottle of gasoline by the shallow. When we came up from the beach, we'd wipe our feet off, go on about our business. But I knew a lot of that stuff, and I wasn't anxious to be drafted. I graduated at 17 from Merchantville High School in June. I wouldn't be 18 until August, so I waited till August. And my then girlfriend registered me for the draft. She was a volunteer on the draft board. And I mean, that's kind of a shock, you know. I had been sheltered, I'm sure. I'd never slept a night away from home. Boy Scout camp was $10. And in the Depression, families didn't have $10. It wasn't just me, it was my whole neighborhood. I'm not asking you to to feel sorry for me. It's just the way things were in those days. And they're going to pick me right out of that environment just like a snap of a finger. I got inducted down in Camden at the old armory, and it's still there. And they have you strip all your clothes off, and walk all around, and have all these doctors checking you. I was really embarrassed. I felt Barry, did you have a question?
No, I had scratched my ear.
And then I got inducted, and I thought, you're going to get a choice of service. So I passed the written test. What service would you like to be in? I say the Signal Corps. My brother was in the Signal Corps, and I always looked up to him. Well, the Signal Corps is full. I said, well, how about the Air Force? They said, well, we have a few openings there. So I took the Air Force test. I passed that. They sat me on the Air Force bench, and I thought, I'm in the Air Force. Well, I said, the dentist wants to take one more look at you. You got too much overbite. You couldn't wear the oxygen mask in the plane. You're in the infantry. That was no choice as far as I was concerned. I was sick. So they sent me up to Fort Dix. And Fort Dix was a big induction center where you got your shots and all that stuff. Of course, I get KP first thing. They give me about 6 or 8 bags of potatoes to peel with an electric peeler, with like a washing machine where these potatoes spun around in water. And the first time I did a bag, there was just little tiny things. And the mess sergeant, he really called me. How can I feed 3,000 men with it? So I do them again, and the next thing, too much skin, too many eyes on them. The third time was too many. I never did sue the guy. But I never saw him again, so I was happy to get out of that job. If you were there 10 days, you were supposed to get a weekend pass. Well, I was there 9 days, and they put me on a train. This was just before Christmas. The only good thing in Fort Dix was Jack Leonard was there. I don't know how many remember Jack Leonard and the song Marie. And he had a band, and I went every night I could up there and see Jack Leonard. I'm on a train, not knowing where I'm going, and you think troop train would have priority. No way. Troop trains were the lowest priority because any kind of material would have priority over us if it had anything to do with the war effort. So we spent about 3 or 4 days going to Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Go into Camp Shelby. It's still there. But what we lived in is gone. They had something called Hutmans left over from World War I. No windows, 4 light bulbs on a string, 2 potbelly stoves on each end, no partitions at all. Your non-commissioned officers slept in that same room with you. You were just never free of them. They were always on your back for everything. And here I am, half crying there at the time. I was afraid. So, I never drank coffee in my life. And in the Army in those days, coffee was all you drank. There was no such thing as juice. Milk was powdered, and you only got a half a ladle on your cereal once in a while. And every morning I couldn't wait to get out of that mess hall and throw up down the street. I just couldn't hold back. That went on for at least 2 weeks. Then the latrine was down the end of the company street. And when you went in the door, there was 15 hoppers about in a row, backed up by 15 wash basins, no partitions. On the left was the door you went in. That was a great big shower room with no partition. I was kind of embarrassed to get down there, too. I used to wait for dark and go down by myself, and nobody was there. Of course, after you're in there for a month or 2, you're hunting somebody to walk down with you to keep you company. But in the beginning, it was kind of a mess for me. I have to keep track of my things on these little cards. I had a first squad sergeant named Marsh Schoenberg. He was a Texan, and he exhibited all attributes that Texans are so famous for. Hard as nails, man of few words, and the words were cuss words and all kinds of stuff. And he could smoke a cigarette and never take it out of his mouth and get the longest ash I ever saw. Drop it on his uniform and then give us hell like it was our fault. We made